Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we're bringing back one of my favorite people in the world, Sarah Drasner. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jason. This is really great. You and I have talked a lot about this, and so I'm so excited to be here again with you.
I think this is going to be so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can hopefully help some people find that first shot, or if you're trying to hire, how to find great people for your team. So today we are talking specifically about hiring. And there are few people in this industry with more qualifications to do hiring than Sarah Drasner. Sarah, for those who are not familiar with your work, do you want to give us a little background?
Sure. So I am VP of Developer Experience in Netlify. I actually hired Jason. I'm doing the wrong way, this way, Jason. And I manage a pretty big team there. It's about 10% of the company. And then before that, I've been a manager of engineering at Zillow. I've also been a manager or lead at other companies like distributed systems companies, Fauna, who is a sponsor here. And I've also interviewed at a lot of places. So Jason and I were just kind of talking about, like, we've been hiring a bit lately, and sometimes people are really good candidates, and like there are things that like go a certain way towards us saying yes versus saying no, and we wanted to be, transparent about like things that can really get you further along in the process and get you set up for success, and also to share some of the things that like we've both done poorly in interviewing processes, so that you know that you're not alone. Because like, I will caveat.
This is going to be a productive episode. Okay, so you'll caveat with some corgis and...
I'll caveat with corgis always. And also just state, like, this is our opinions and from our point of view, and we're not everybody, and everybody's a little bit different. So things that worked for us might not work for you in not every case. And so I don't want it to sound like, oh, just do it our way and everything is that way. So Flappy Birds of Jason agree.
Yeah, it's... I think the chat's going to find all the games today. So that Flappy Jason is that's courtesy of Cassidy, who Sarah also hired onto the Netlify team. So I know that hiring me maybe calls Sarah's judgment into question. Hiring Cassidy, though, redeems it. So,
I have no regrets.
Okay, so I want to jump right in and take questions. Chat, this is going to be an AMA, so we are very much going to drive all the content of this episode with your questions. So please post those in the chat. If you are looking for a job, if you are trying to hire someone, if you want to goad us into talking about burgers, yeah, all of that, it's fair game. So drop it in the chat right now. While we're waiting for you to get your questions in, I'm going to do a quick shout out to our sponsor. So let me slip over to this view for a second. And first and foremost, make sure, if you are not already doing so, that you go and follow Sarah on Twitter. She is a wonderful stream full of jokes and tech content and just, bright rays of sunshine. Also, today we're going to do a giveaway of this amazing Drasner t-shirt that I am wearing right now. You can see it here. Look how good this is. I'm going to start this now. And I don't know how many I'm going to give away, so I'm just going to let this run for the whole stream. And
like hiring in tech or
okay, and
not buy this shirt.
So we have live captioning going on right now. It is made possible by Jordan at White Coat Captioning, who's with us today. Thank you, Jordan, for hanging out and helping make the show accessible. The captioning is made possible by sponsorships from Netlify, Fauna, Auth0, and Hasura, all of whom are kicking in to make the show a little more accessible to more people. And why did all my images disappear? That's no fun. Cool. That's a fun bug I'm going to have to figure out later. In the meantime, yeah, look at this. Look how great this is. We have live captioning going on. With that being said, I'm going to flip back over to the chat and let's start answering some questions. All right. Your very own Drasner raffle. Here we go. Questions. Whiteboarding coding questions have fallen out of favor. What gets a better signal?
Yeah, actually, that's a great one. So what we have been doing on the team, so a lot of people ask these questions of like, do we even do technical interviews? Technical interviews do tend to be quite broken. I completely understand and agree with that. The only caveat being that like, you do have to kind of test someone's skills a little bit before they jump on a team, especially if you're going to be moving really fast and building things. And so there are different ways of approaching that, right? Like there are ways that you can do it where you explore someone's GitHub, but that also means that you're saying you have to do a bunch of work on the side of your normal work to show that you can do work. And that is rude too. So the kind of in-between thing that we've decided to do, since one of the problems with whiteboarding is that it's very performative, and coding isn't really performative, right? Like you don't spend a ton of time showing people, like unless your job is literally live coding, which very, very few jobs are, then really you're coding by yourself with Google and things like that at your disposal. So what we decided to do was to write up a list of questions we were going to ask in the technical interview and then give it to people a few days in advance so that they could prepare and practice and Google and try to find the answers on their own. And then, you know, I asked Jason to sometimes do the technical interviews too, and a bunch of other members of the team. So we kind of all, you know, have different roles, you know, like we switch out who's the technical interview is, but we keep the questions the same every time. And this is really important. The reason why it's important to keep the questions the same and standard every single time is it doesn't eliminate, you can't eliminate bias, but like it reduces bias because let's say you just like someone a little, right? And studies show that you like someone a little if they're like you. And so that's where bias breeds. So you might, if you're switching questions around, you might be easier on someone who you like more, and you might only be easier on them because they look like you. And so if you keep the questions standardized, there's less of a chance that things are moving around for every candidate. So the questions standardized, they see it beforehand. And the big deal when we're doing those technical interviews, and what I would, you know, kind of encourage everybody to do is to think through how you're talking about what you're doing, because a big part of the interview process isn't really the solution. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is how are you thinking about the code? How are you reasoning about what's in front of you? There's plenty of times where people don't provide the real answer or like the correct answer, or they don't solve the thing, but the way that they talked about, reasoned about the questions that they asked that were really intelligent, that nails the interview. So hopefully you're interviewing with teams that have that kind of similar approach, but I've heard a lot of hiring managers say the same thing, that what they're looking for is your ability to communicate about the code that you're writing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been doing to structure our technical interviews that I really like is we do our technical interviews in two parts right now, where we have a first part, which is we're coming up with a coding challenge and sending that to the applicant before the interview, where we tell you ahead of time, this is what you're going to work on. And then you're going to build it live with us and kind of walk us through what you're doing, why. And then the second half is show and tell. Bring us some code that you're proud of. Talk to us about why. And I think that both of those are brilliant, because the thing that I've always disliked about tech interviews is that they felt like pop quizzes, and it felt like you were assessing someone's test anxiety more than you were assessing their technical skill. And so by giving these things in advance, letting somebody sit with the problem and look at the code ahead of time, it's not going to remove that initial anxiety. You're not removing that fear that like, okay, I'm going into a room full of strangers and I have to write some code and oh my God, what am I going to do? But it at least removes that element of surprise. Like, well, what if they spring something on me that I've never seen before? Well, that can't happen. Well, you are going to know what is coming. And I really like that. And it also, I found, since we've started doing that, has led to way better conversations about the code, because you're not like putting somebody on the spot. They get to come in after looking at it a little bit, letting it sit in their brain. I think that's so nice, and really does seem to mean a lot.
And that second part of the interview where they talk about what thing that they're proud of, I love that part. Like, I mean, you can be proud of any piece of anything, right? Like you can be, and sometimes it's something that's proprietary, and so they can only share their screen for a moment, and sometimes it's something that they made on GitHub, and it doesn't have to be something that they built as a side project or anything. We do even give the option that if it is super proprietary and they can't share their screen, that they can just talk us through what the code was and did.
Yeah.
Again, because we're interested in hearing how people think through those problems. But you know, first of all, seeing people light up and talk through like this gnarly challenge that they had. Some people bring refactoring things. Some people bring like a thing that they wrote from scratch. I feel like that's like a really fun part of the interview because it's more guided by them to talk through what, and you can kind of sense like what they think is challenging is really interesting too, because it kind of does denote what level they are a little bit. Like something, you know, I've had people not at Netlify, but in companies past, bring something that I was like, okay, that isn't super challenging, so they're probably like at a lower level. And then somebody bring in something that like, I'm like, wow, can't believe you figured that out. So that can also give people a sense of that too. So if somebody asks you that question, know that they're kind of thinking in the back of their mind what level you might be considering what thing you're bringing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, like the tech interview is a really bad proxy for getting a sense of what someone values, what someone has seen before, what someone is capable of adapting to on the fly. There's so many, like we can't figure those things out. We don't have time to go talk to all of your previous coworkers and ask those types of questions. So basically we're having a tech interview to see whether or not you project do you give us confidence that you're going to be able to do that stuff when you show up in this job? And that's I think that's what makes tech interviews suck, is that they're a poor proxy for so much information. And so, the best we can do is try to set people up to give the best version of themselves. Right.
And to Jason's point, you're interviewing them too, right? So if they're giving you a technical interview that has a bunch of red flags, that's something that you should take into consideration. Like there was one interview process I was in where it was like trick question after trick question and kind of like this weird vibes the whole time that we were doing the thing. I did know the answer to the trick questions because I had happened to run into it. But I was thinking to myself, like, well, this is just by chance that I ran into this thing. Why are you trying to trick your candidates? And like some of the ways that people conduct themselves in those processes, keep an eye out on that, because that's going to be your team, right? Like if you feel like there's some weird or bad juju going on even in that technical interview, that might not be the job that you want either. Right.
And to flip that around, if you are on a technical interviewing panel, remember that it is not the place to show everybody how smart you are. That is the wrong venue. Okay, so we have a million questions, so I'm gonna move us on to another one here. Cohort Code asks, what profiles and pages need to be in place? So specifically what they're asking is when you find out about a new candidate, where are you looking first to get a sense of who they are?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at their resume, number one. Sometimes if there's so many candidates, we're not even getting to the cover letter, but I will say that the cover letter has made or broken applicants before. So don't pass up the cover letter. Just know that like some people, if you have one role and you have 400 candidates, sometimes people are going really quickly through those things. So you do want to do some things that make your application stand out. Some of the like kind of basic things to not do are like, don't have a bunch of spelling and grammar mistakes, because again, think about it this way. The team that you are applying for has very limited time. Imagine you're trying to push a feature, you realize that you're short-staffed, you got to get someone in there right away. It's because of that short-staffedness that they're even looking for someone. And so then they're going through 400 applicants. They know that everybody in that pool are probably great. Like there are very few people we take out of the running because they're just not a fit. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do to kind of filter and sort really quickly. And so for that reason, one, don't get too disgruntled if you get passed up a couple times. Sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes it's just because there's a huge influx of candidates. The other thing is that if you can do things that make your your application to stand out a bit. Like formatting does help actually, like showing that you give, that you care about details and stuff, that can be really good. Likewise, if you haven't put the time and energy into your application and your resume, people are probably going to throw it out because they have all of these other applicants. Why would they spend more time on someone who, hasn't put a lot of time into the resume? So thinking about it from the perspective of these people are probably engineers just like me, running around just like me, have limited time and bandwidth. What would I want to see that would jump out at me to get this job? One thing that I really do like is when there's a lot of the information's just in that one page of the resume, and there's a small description for the last 3 jobs you had of what you did that was impactful there. So like if we say like we were at Netlify, like Jason and I had a horrible burger off and Sarah beat him and got the world belts. That's like the impact I made at Netlify. But just a short sentence or two of like, you moved some OKR, you reconfigured their entire Webpack system. What did you do that really helped company goals? It should be less about yourself than what you did for the company, right? It shouldn't be like, I'm the best. It should be like, the company is really great because of this thing I did.
Yeah, and Xander asked a question that I think ties really well into this, and I think you made so many good points already. But he asked, how do you make your cover letter sound and feel genuine? Because words are hard. Like, how do you say something in a way that feels like it's connected? And you've already said so much to that point. One thing that I've noticed that has really been beneficial for me is to make my cover letter not about me. I am really uncomfortable selling myself. I don't like to walk up to say like, hello, I am awesome. I am great. You should hire me because I am the best. It feels weird to say that. But if instead I go up and I say, hey, I like your company. I see opportunities for your company. Here's some things that I could do that would help your company reach the next level. Now I feel really comfortable doing that. And that also I think is more impactful because you're not saying, look at me. You're saying, I see opportunities and I can draw connections between an opportunity that exists and a solution that would benefit all of us.
Yeah. And I mean, to Jason's point too, if you do write a cover letter and spend the time on that, just double sure that you read the job description, because people have taken themselves out of the running by writing a cover letter that's like, we're like, that's not what the job is. So like, make sure that if you're writing something, and usually like, it's okay if it's a bit form letter-esque, like there's some things that you did for previous companies, and then there's just maybe a sentence or two for that company in specific. You don't have to rewrite the entire thing top down every single time. You can if you want to. I'm sure that people would appreciate that. But if you are doing a lot of resumes, I don't want you to feel like you have to write a brand new cover letter every single time, but just a sentence or two about like why you think you're a good fit for that company. And it should be is like company first, and then stuff about yourself is usually kind of helpful. I mean, there's no real rule for this, but like that would be my suggestion.
Well, and you know what you just said about that, actually, like there's no real rule. This is so much like any relationship. You are putting yourself out there as yourself, and you're looking for somebody who values what you value. So there's no formula that's going to work where you're just like, I would like a job and I've put this perfectly so that everybody will appreciate it. The things that Sarah's looking for, and the things that I'm looking for, and the things that a hiring manager at Amazon are looking for, they're all going to be slightly different. And we all have like certain things that align with our values more. So part of what you're doing, as Sarah said, you're interviewing the company as well. Being your full authentic self when you interview, when you write about what you're passionate about, when you share the code that you're interested in, do that, because you want to find the company that's interested in that shares that passion and those values. Because if you find a company that's aligned, like if you're super excited about building great front ends and you're not super excited about writing Node backends, but you think you need to do Node to get the job and you write a bunch of Node code for the interview, you're going to be sad when your job is writing mostly Node code. Like find the job where you get to write front end, right? And it's okay if you don't get other opportunities because that means that they weren't aligned.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing to say and note. And we actually have brought people into final rounds of interviews just based on their cover letter too. So just letting you know that like that's not always what we do, but
Sure.
it happened. Just want to be transparent about that. Someone mentioned like I'm confused. What a cover letter is some part of an email or another document together with your resume. Yeah, basically, like most companies, if you upload, they'll have you upload a resume and a cover letter. Or if you have to email them, I would do both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the cover letter doesn't have to be a long letter. It can just be a paragraph or so.
Yeah. So in the spirit of like what people are seeing before they ever talk to you, Prodverity is asking, do you look at portfolios, GitHub, blogs, any other sources when you're evaluating candidates, and like how does that play into your evaluation?
I do. I try not to bank too much on that though, because I do feel like it's tough for people to sometimes get the time to spend on rebuilding a whole brand new portfolio site. I definitely look, and if it's fantastic, they get escalated. So it's like, it's another one of those things where it's like, if you haven't done it, I don't personally think that you should be out of the running. However, if you have an amazing one, chances are I'm going to be like, oh, we should meet with this person. So it is something that you can do. If you're trying to do everything that you can, that's a good thing to do, is to kind of like pay attention to that. I would at least, like, if you can, like, clean up your GitHub, just like make sure that the things that are pinned are the things you want pinned and stuff. Because I take a look at that. I will also look at people's Twitter accounts just to see if, like, you know, there's anything that's like, it's more to see if there's red flags than if they're good. It's not like be like our team. It's more like to see if, you know, they've been rude to people or something like that. I think other employers do that too. So I'm just trying to be transparent that, like, if people start to see kind of weird red flags on your Twitter account, that is something that they look at.
I mean, I definitely Google everybody that I'm about to interview, because, you know, if the first thing I find when I Google is you being mean to a bunch of people, I'm kind of like, nah, I don't even know if I want to have this interview. Like, if that's your primary brand is starting fights on the internet, that doesn't bode well for teamwork, right?
And also keep in mind that if we go into an interview process with you, what we're saying is we are okay dunking the team's productivity for many hours that week on you. So it's an investment of time that we're taking. And so if you can think about it that way, like, they're trying to do due diligence on their side to not, you know, have the, like, Jason is very valuable to our team. I know it doesn't seem like that on this chat. I'm just kidding. Jason's incredibly valuable to our team. So I don't want to have him spend a lot of time in interviews if the person is going to be mean to him, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to put my staff through that. So that's also what they're checking for.
Absolutely. So here's a question that I think is a really good one, and it's probably top of mind for a lot of folks. For people who are looking for their first job, they're not going to have those 3 previous jobs on their resume. They're not going to be able to tell you stories about how they made impact. How does somebody stand out? How do they tell those types of stories that get your attention?
I actually wrote an article about this on Theatrics. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. Talk amongst yourselves.
Is it the Learning to Learn one?
No, it is. Let me see if I can. I'm full of pressure right now, and I can't find it really fast. I will hook it up in the show notes. But basically, I went through, so Marco Rogers, who's a great person to follow on Twitter, had this kind of question asked to him. And so he was walking through it and then asked, like, other people what their feelings about the thing was. There are a couple of things that you can do. So, like, a couple of people mentioned, GitHub profiles and things like that. Again, that's tough if you're a newer programmer to necessarily have. it helps for sure. One thing that you can do is talk through what you've learned so far and what your experience with that has been, right? So if you went to a coding boot camp or something, I'm not saying you need to, but if you did, talk through that experience. Say, like, I went to a coding boot camp. I was really interested in this and this. Okay, yeah, so there's the article.
When you said Marco Rogers, I was like, oh, I can find this.
So like that's one thing that I would kind of suggest. I have wrote down just like a bunch of suggestions through this entire article. So formatting is important. That was one that we covered already. You can throw in open source projects if you have them. Call out your contributions in your work experience. Like, so I think I mentioned that, like, how did it change things? If your experience is limited, talk through whatever experience you have. You learned on Code Academy. What was that like?
Yeah.
What were the things that you found interesting on there? And what are the problems that you're excited about solving at a big company? Or even if you're not excited about, like, what are you willing to solve at a big company? Don't pad your Reddit resume with a bunch of experience you don't have, or stuff you think is like, a few jobs back, I had this one candidate put in quotes from his mom in the thing. It was really cute, but like, it wasn't really helpful in terms of like understanding what the job, what it would be like.
Cassidy's feeling called out right now. No, I think that those are all great points. And maybe one thing that's also worth pointing out is, like, I don't know, and you can confirm this, but in my experience, when you're hiring somebody junior, what you're looking for is capacity. You're looking for potential. Like, is this person showing that they're capable of learning, that they're interested in learning, that they're willing to put the work in to gain new knowledge? So it's not so much what do you know, but are you interested, willing, and excited about doing the work to know? And that tends to be like, when I'm looking at somebody who's new in the industry, the people I go to bat for are the ones that I consistently see showing up, trying things, improving every day. And those are the folks that I'm always going to like give a nod to or a referral to, because I'm just like, wow, they're doing the work. Like, they're every day, they're showing up, they're doing the work, and I can see progress. Like, this person's going to be a star.
Yeah, and likewise, I would say, like, this doesn't work as well now, but in the olden days, I have hired juniors from meeting them at meetups, and they were lovely people. And like, so, and we got to talking, and it was like a good conversation about where they wanted to learn and grow from. So like, that human connection bit, don't ever underestimate the human connection bit. Like, if somebody's reading through a million resumes and they know one of them, they might look at that one a little bit more carefully than other, because that's how humans work. Like, humans are, oh, I know that person, they were great. So if you're more junior, that is definitely something, like, especially when we get into post-pandemic times, I hope, or maybe show up at a virtual meetup and talk with people. I know that networking kind of sucks, and it sucks to like come in and but you don't have to make it networking-y, right? You can have just a normal conversation as a person with somebody and talk through things. Yeah,
for sure. I think like that is such a like, the network is an incredible thing. I'm going to post a link to a video, an interview with Cassidy that I did on the Free Code Camp channel, where Cassidy shares like at length the ways that she built a network, made connections, got in touch with people, and all of the incredible opportunities that opened up for her. So I think that is definitely something that is very undervalued. I think, especially when you're new in your career, you're like, well, I just need to do the work. No, like, do the work, but meet people, tell them, like, put it into the universe. Like, tell everybody that you're looking for a job, show them what work you're doing, tell them what you're excited about. Like, you're never going to feel ready. You know, like I'm 20 years into this career, and I'm always like, well, I'm not quite ready to apply for that job, right? You just have to throw yourself at it and say, look, I'm putting it out into the universe. I would like to do this thing. And sometimes you get told no. And a lot of times somebody hears that and they go, oh, I know somebody who's looking for someone just like you. Let me make an introduction. So when I put it on Twitter that I want to be on a podcast or whatever, I don't know anybody who reaches out to me, but because somebody else does, the connection gets made. You gotta make that known. You gotta reach out to people, make those friends, show people that you're doing the work, and they'll make connections. The network is unbelievably effective.
Yeah, and Lori's absolutely right. Twitter is a great, remote way of connecting with people. Even like sharing what you know publicly on Twitter can open doors if you don't have a lot of experience there. So, you know, I'm always sensitive to recommend Twitter because it's got good parts and bad parts, right? Like it's like, yes, it's opened so many doors. It's also like very stressful sometimes, but it does allow for a lot of those kind of remote connections that people are referring to. Someone asked the question actually that was quite good. That was like, how much should you exaggerate on your resume? I would say like, so there are companies where if you get all the way to the end, they do a background check. And if you lied about anything, even a month, like by a month, you said you worked at a company a little bit longer than you did, they will not let you pass go and collect $200. Like they won't allow you to join. Microsoft is like that. I think Apple's like that. There's a bunch of companies. Salesforce is like that. So I wouldn't lie on your resume. What I would do is talk through with exuberance the things that you've done well while you were there. So be a little careful about flat out lies for dates, but it's okay to say like, we did this and this was really great and the outcomes were spectacular. So I guess I'm not giving you like a great answer for that. Basically just like be super careful that you don't shoot yourself in the foot there.
Yeah, I think hyperbole is not necessarily a bad thing. Like being excited, saying that something was amazing when somebody else might say it was just okay. That's all right because you're stating your own excitement. But yeah, I would never recommend flat out lying. Like misrepresenting a fact is going to get you in trouble. Playing up the coolness of a thing or playing up the impact of a thing without changing any numbers, I think is perfectly normal. That's just sales. and a lot of getting hired is learning how to sell yourself. And again, like the way I sell myself, at least, is I talk about the way that a company benefited through projects that we did. And, because I'm really uncomfortable talking about my own value because it's hard to just talk about that in a vacuum. You got to frame it through, here's an impact. And sometimes, playing up the impact it's a good thing. It gets somebody to pay attention and ask you questions about it, as opposed to you being like, well, I was on a team and I did a thing and it was okay. If I read that, I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad that you had a job. But if you tell me that you blew somebody away, then I'm like, I want to hear more about that. What did you do in this project? And then you get to tell me instead of me like reading it.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's one piece in here it's only tangentially related, but it's kind of related to the networking thing a little bit. Understand and remember that everyone that you're talking to in the entire process, they all know each other. So if you're a recruiter, they work with the people that you're interviewing. They're not on such different teams that they're never going to talk to each other. In fact, they're talking to each other a lot during that process. So do not be mean to recruiters. Please don't be mean to recruiters. Just don't do that anyway. But even if it's just like you will shoot yourself in the foot if you get a really good interview and then I hear back from the recruiter that you treated them poorly. I'm probably not going to move forward with you as a teammate because that's who you are when you don't think that somebody is like worth your while or something. That's not cool.
Yeah, if how respectful you are is dependent on how valuable you think the person you're talking to is, I'm hard out. Like if I am out with somebody and I see him treat like a waiter rude, like it's over. I'm done.
Yeah. I mean, we're really looking for people who are going to be able to talk to multiple people across the entire company and be a good team and stuff. But it also like treating people like there's some sort of hierarchy is just not.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, you can think hierarchically without being disrespectful too. Like there's a way to have somebody who works for you that doesn't get treated like dirt, I think that's always the thing that means a lot to me is like, do you show that you find everybody to be a valuable human, even if their role isn't something that you would consider to be like an exalted role. And I think that's, to me, that's like where you start to see character shine through.
Yeah.
And for
Because
me,
you check for bias a little bit on the team too.
for
Like
sure.
if you're in a room with Jason and Cassidy, are you only talking to Jason and you're ignoring Cassidy? Like that's not good. So like I think other teams do have that kind of process too, where we're kind of just checking a little if you're a little bit ruder to the other, to the non-white men.
Mhm.
We are not the only ones who look for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to turn a little bit to the other side of this, because a few people have asked questions about trying to hire. And we were just talking about bias. So this is actually, I think, a good one. After you've exhausted your own personal network, asks Robert Tables, how do you go about going further and finding more people? And I'm going to add a question to that, which is, how do you make sure that you're not only finding more people just like you?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually post to Benny Kunci's newsletter, the Diversified Tech one. I think we were working on posting in People of Color in Tech newsletter. There's a few other Slacks, like I'm in a couple of Women in Tech Slacks and things like that. We post in places like that. So it's not, and I would say we're not always, just working off of our own, network either. Like we do definitely tweet out from accounts when we have a job opening open, but I would say that that's not necessarily just like people I know all the time either. Like Netlify account tweets out, we have job openings too.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a whole thing that the recruiting team does with LinkedIn that I won't pretend to understand because it's very nuanced and I know they put a ton of work into it. I really don't want to misrepresent it because I don't know what it is, but they do a lot of that kind of like using LinkedIn groups and things like that. So those are a couple of ways of reaching out beyond networks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that's one thing that always confused me when I was younger and now confuses me in the opposite direction. Because when I was younger, I felt like, well, if you put the job out into the world, people will see it. And what I didn't realize is that me putting a job out into the world, if all the people that I follow and interact with on Twitter are like white men, that means that only the people in my network see that. And then if all the people they follow are white men, that means that when they share it, only more white men see it. And I didn't understand the impact of network effects and the impact of not reaching out to where communities are. It was easy for me as a young guy to say, well, if somebody doesn't see the job, that's on them. It's like, of course it's not. If I put something in my closet, I can't get mad at you for not knowing it's there. Like I got to put it in front of you so that you have an opportunity. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. There's also putting out posts that are about the work that you're doing to entice people to, like at Zillow, a couple of times we kind of documented an entire process that were like moving over to GraphQL and things like that, because we were trying to entice people who were GraphQL experts to want to join the team. Like if that kind of moving of an infrastructure to GraphQL was interesting to people, so we put links to like, if you're excited about this, and that's a kind of nice one because it gathers people with the same interests in that group. Like people are literally going like, I love this article. I love GraphQL. Oh, wait, I can apply for a job here. So that can be a good way too.
Yeah, I guess like I feel very much if you're hiring that you've got to put this out in as many places as possible, right? Like find Discord groups where you can post the job. Find friends who have big networks who are like in touch with people that are doing the kind of work that you're looking to hire for. Pay for placement on, there's Black Tech Pipeline, there's the People of Color in Tech, Diversified Tech, Code 2040. Like there are all of these programs that specifically work to place jobs in front of people that you may not normally talk to. And all of those things are that investment is absolutely worth it in terms of, because if you do that work, network effects are compounding. If you only talk to people like you, eventually your network gets pretty small. You only know all the people who know each other. If you make the effort to reach out into new networks, your network is continually expanding. Every time you hire somebody out of your network just doubled because that person has their own network.
Yeah, and you can actually look into, like, if you're for Twitter, for instance, you can actually look to see who other people follow and follow some of them.
Mm-hmm.
I follow tons of people that I think are super cool and interesting in a diverse group. Like, you can follow the people I follow, or you can follow the people Jason follows, and like so on and so forth. If somebody's really interesting to you, then chances are the people they've chosen to follow are going to be fairly interesting as well. So that's a way to kind of go beyond like what your normal thing is, or just like who Twitter is like shoving at your face.
Yeah. So, okay, let's see what other questions we have here. Twitter, let's see. More questions about posting jobs. I'm going to make questions about where you should go, an exercise for the reader, because I don't want to make this like a list post. Let's see. And there's also great recommendations in the chat.
Why are they saying the Drasner shirt so often? What is wrong?
Because it's a raffle. Oh, no. You gotta keep letting people know that it's available. Don't forget, we're giving away this Drasner shirt. Look at this thing. It's beautiful. You could also be a Drasnerd.
No.
There is a raffle for anybody who hasn't seen it. And if you are a subscriber to this channel, you get double tickets. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. We've got people wearing, is Witty Pants, is that Joseph Whittington? What's up, man? Good to see you. Also wearing his Drasnerd shirt today. So this makes me so happy. Somebody suggested a Jason Nerd shirt to complete the collection, but I don't see anybody out here trolling. I mean, really, what trolling requires follow through, y'all. Thank you for the subs, y'all. Enjoy your extra tickets.
Jason doesn't want, like, he clearly wants this shirt. So, like, we gotta figure out something that is, like, truly horrible for him.
But it's not gonna work because I am very much, I feel very much that all attention is good attention, and I just bask in it. Oh my God. Me.
Okay. I can do something with that.
Lane's dork. Oh, Prince, come on. Jeez. All right, let's get back to some questions, y'all. What's up? What do you want to know? What's left? I have a question about somebody actually asked a question that was better than mine, so let me find it. It was, if you are not qualified for a role, should you apply, or when should you consider applying for it? Like when is enough qualification there?
I would say you should still, if it's your dream job, you should still apply. But understand that if you don't get it, it's okay. So apply knowing with like optimism, but like understanding that if it doesn't work out, you're going to keep trying. You're not just going to take that and run away and say, I'll never try again. But I think you should always go out for the job, because a lot of times job descriptions are just things that they really would like, and they're willing to bend on things. I've definitely put job postings out where like I've said that I wanted a certain thing, and a candidate comes along and they're like, I don't have that, but I have something else that's really something. And I didn't even think through that thing like that. People are more flexible than they seem to be in the job description. Also, they've done studies that show that like some people apply anyway and they still get it. And then some people will not, and then they, won't, and things like that. So there are things like that have to do with like confidence and bias and things like that. Just apply anyway, and understand that if you didn't get it, just keep shooting those shots. Like, don't take it personally and keep going. I never look at somebody who applied who doesn't have the qualifications and go, oh, they should not have applied. I would go like, I wish I could take this candidate, but I don't think that it's right.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a hugely important thing. Like, there are very, very few situations where I have seen a resume and thought to myself, why? You know, like, and like that will happen, especially if you like post a job on LinkedIn where people just spam their resume, and like a CPA will apply for a web developer role, and it's like, what happened here? But but I think that the general thing is like, I've found that if you have any of the skills that are listed, it's worth a shot. Like, especially if you're interested in everything that's being talked about and the responsibilities for the job. I think, that, and actually that dovetails nicely with a question from KV that I love. What if your current or first job doesn't develop the same skills that you want to develop in, like, where you want to go in your career? How do you make sure that you don't get pushed away from where you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. It actually dovetails on the last one nicely. That, like, what I was going to say is, if the one that you're going for and applying for, and you don't have those skills, take those skills and be like, okay, this is what I need to focus on for the future. This is the job that I want. Likewise, for some of that, there are ways. So like, it's twofold. Try to build the skills that you need for the job that you want as much as you can. But there's another piece that's like, were there parts of the job that you have that you can highlight more on a resume? So like, let's say my job technically was this, and I want to do this other thing. There were maybe parts of something I did here that I couldn't. So like, if I applied for a job over here, I would say, like, I did this role. Here are the things that I did that are around that area that I can kind of focus on highlighting in the resume. You're not lying. You're just highlighting the stuff that is most applicable for that role. And likewise, if you have any GitHub projects, or if you have any other kind of pieces that you've done that are kind of like that role centric, I've definitely seen. So I used to be an engineering manager. That's just engineering, like product engineering. In this role, some groups that I manage are engineering. Some of them are more, have hybrid advocacy and engineering. We get resumes sometimes from people who aren't an advocate, but they want to be an advocate. And what they do sometimes that's really effective is say all of the things that they do for their normal job, and then say, here are the speakings that the times I've spoken at tech conferences, here are the articles I've written here. I don't have an advocate role now, but I want to break in. That's awesome. That's great. That's something that we do want to see. So that's just one example, right? Like, the GraphQL one is another one. You could say, like, well, I don't work 100% on GraphQL, but here's what I did do on a project at the company where I did use GraphQL, or here's another side project where I used Hasura or something like that.
Yeah. So that's actually, a follow-up that I've seen in a couple different forms here is, how do you keep, like, what are the right steps or helpful steps if you get rejected from a job to help turn that into your next opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I would say is, it depends how far along in the process you got. If you got into any kind of interview stage, you're well within bounds to ask for feedback. I would say, if you do ask for feedback, do not get defensive. Like, you asked for feedback, so that was, and they took time out of their schedule. Again, remember, by the time they're hiring, they needed someone yesterday. They're taking time out of their busy schedule to try to think through what you can improve on. Don't take that and then yell back at them or post elsewhere that they were rude to you for giving feedback. Like, don't do that. So like, if you go through the interview process, you get rejected, you can say, like, what could I have done better? I'm really eager to find another role. This is like, and sometimes when people ask those questions, they have gone on to get the job later. Like, we have somebody on our team that we passed up, not because he was bad, but because there was someone else who was also really good. And then another role came up and he had asked for feedback. So we brought him. I was like, let's just skip past the interview stage. You can just take the job. And part of that is because of the open conversation we had about how the interviewing went right after. I mean, also part of it is lovely and wonderful.
Well, and you actually bring up a really good point, which is that a lot of times, if you don't get a job, it's not because you weren't great. Like, I've been on multiple hiring panels where we've got 4 people that we love and we want all 4 of them, and we've got 1 rec. And, we just end up, ultimately, we're all like, okay, everybody put your heads down and, like, let's do a vote. Who should we put on this team? Because we like them all. and we just picked somebody, and that means 3 people that we would love to work with did not get an offer.
Likewise, if you didn't get an offer, sometimes we are like, oh, front end needs somebody, like maybe pass this candidate over there, or like, and see if that's like aligned with what they want. If we really like you, we'll like ask you if like maybe you'll be open in 6 months when we get another rec or something. Like that works out for you and the team, because then the team doesn't go, have to go and go through the whole search process again. So don't ever see the end of the interview as like the end of everything. Keep in touch, write people thank you letters. I really remember if people write me a thank you letter after an interview, because I'm like,
For real.
oh, good. Oh, it wasn't a bad process for them. That's awesome. Because we're stressed too. Like we want you to have a good experience. We're not like trying to, bully people or anything. So like that's relieving to hear. And then the other piece of this is like, if you didn't get to the interview process and people are just reviewing resumes, you can ask for feedback on a resume, but understand that if they do have 400 candidates, they are running super fast, they have a million things. If they don't respond to you, it does not mean that they are cruel and mean and things like that. They're probably just super busy and some companies have policies where we can't give feedback, where, because there are issues with legal exposure. Like if you give somebody feedback and they don't like that feedback and you say it in the wrong way, you can get sued. And so some companies just say you cannot give feedback because it's an unnecessary legal risk in their eyes, which I disagree with that policy. I think that we should always be able to give some feedback, but I understand where it comes from. And I try not to take it personally if I, in the past when I've applied and I asked for feedback and I didn't get any, I'm bummed. I would have loved to have gotten some feedback, but I also know that, that is a policy that exists. Man, there are so many good questions and I'm trying not to miss them. I know. So if you asked a question a long time ago that we didn't answer, maybe ask it again, because there are so many questions in here. Oh, here we go. Linda asks, is there a good way to follow up if you liked a role and the interviews went well, but you weren't chosen? I'm going to assume that you mean like if you wanted to see if there's another opportunity later, or if you were trying to get feedback. Actually, let's go from both ways. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had that for sure. Like in that last piece where we were talking through, like sending people a thank you note is one way, asking people for feedback, doing both also works. Like, thank you so much for your time and energy. I really appreciated our time together. Would you consider doing, would you consider me in the future or something like that? Or you have feedback for me or something like that. Those things are all within bounds, especially if you get to the interview process. By the time you do the interview process, like you're both investing in each other quite a bit. So you're within bounds to like keep the door open. You can also say like things like, let's keep in touch, and, you can keep in touch too. There have also been applicants who don't just, I'm the hiring manager, but a lot of other people are invested in that process, Jason being one. You don't have to just send it to me either. You could send it to someone who did a different part of the interview. You could send it to somebody who, did a technical interview. Like keeping people in the forefront of their minds, like that can help you for sure.
Absolutely.
Just try not to put too much pressure on them too, because I know that this sounds weird, but like it really sucks to reject people too. Like sometimes, like Jason said, you have 4 awesome candidates and you're like, oh man, I just really want all of them and we can only hire one of them. And so if you asking for feedback's great. If you're like, no, I need better feedback, then like there was just another really good candidate. Sometimes there's not a better answer than that. Like, so that's a thing too.
Bad Time 100 asks, do you have any thoughts on a first tech job seeker with service industry experience? I truly think the soft skills I learned are invaluable, but I'm always unsure of how or if I should try to leverage that in the application process, because listing coffee shop on a resume doesn't sound that appealing. How would you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can talk through, so you can list coffee shop if the description underneath talks through those soft skills.
Absolutely.
So if you're saying like, I worked at a coffee shop, this might not seem like it's related to the tech job, but here are the skills that I developed that are absolutely going to help me in this role. That's totally great. It's just writing coffee shop and having that be the end of that is like, okay, I don't know what to do with that there. It's not like they're going to hopefully be like, oh, I worked at a coffee shop. I'm sure a lot of other people worked at coffee shops before they got into tech. That's pretty normal. It's just make it relevant to the work experience.
I mean, like a good example of this is, I know when I was younger, I worked all sorts of service jobs. I worked in pizza places. I worked back of house, like stocking shelves in Target. Every single one of those jobs that I had taught me something that has made me better at my job now. And I think the thing that we've got to flip is that feeling of like any skill that we have not being good enough because of how we got it. If you learned a skill, you learned a skill. It doesn't matter if you feel like working at a McDonald's isn't a glamorous job or you're going to have to try so much harder, chat, if you want to bury us in boops, because I made them much smaller and I made the timeout shorter. So you got to put in work. Oh, geez. Okay. Well, never dare the chat. What did I learn? Okay.
What did we learn
okay,
today?
nicely done. Okay.
We can go and learn with Jason next for no reason.
Oh no. Oh God. We should have known when Cassidy showed up. I saw that subscription and I knew what was going to happen. It is lagging. Yeah, we're overloading. I mean, I'm using Matter.js. It's supposed to be, it's all canvas. It's weird, but also this is probably what, like 1,000 boops at this point. Good. And corgis. Let's see if this finally shuts down the browser.
Like, serious for far too long.
Okay. All right, y'all. Okay. Good. Okay, so we let's see. We lost some questions here.
Oh, you can do it. Come on, little compooper.
My little compooper stood up to the task today, at least. Questions. It's all boops. There are only boops here. Okay, I lost your question. So if you've got questions, you better copy paste those. How do you feel when a candidate initially said no and left the process, but afterwards asks again if the position is still available? So like somebody dropped out of an interview and then applied again? Is that the question? I'm going to assume yes.
I don't think I've actually ever had that happen. So I will just say what I think I would do in that scenario, which is to say that typically the interview process is a process of steps, and somebody, if you waited too long in between saying that you wanted to drop out and re-engaging, other people probably went through a lot of steps in that time. So, I mean, I think you can totally do that. It's just that they might be in a position where they're like, well, everyone else is now in technical interview and final stages, so we're not going to kick it off again. So there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But companies do want people who are excited about the role. So if you dropped out because of like a family matter or something, I think most people would be super understanding about that. But if you said that you dropped out because you just weren't interested in the role, and then you come back in and say, now I am, they probably have a bunch of other candidates, and I'm just assuming they have other candidates, but like if they have a bunch of other candidates, it probably puts you at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a signal that gets sent. Like if you're only halfway in on a job and you like leave because you think you can do better, and then you come back and you say, well, actually I'll settle for you. That doesn't send me a strong signal that you're super invested in this job. So typically speaking, I think if that was the case, if it was like, and there's a difference between, I'm in like 3 hiring pipelines and this one just made me an offer and you're a month out on getting an offer. That's different. Like if you need to eat, you need to eat, right? But there is like, I think you should play offers against each other, but there's also a signal sent when you like get a company to play the offer up because you're obviously trying to get the other job at a higher salary. Like, we can feel when people play those games, and it doesn't feel good to be the pawn in that game.
Yeah, and there are companies that will just make the hiring manager walk away. Like,
Mm,
literally, it won't even be the hiring manager's decision. If they start to hear that there's like a competitive salary thing, some people will just be like, "We're not playing that game. Move on to the next candidate," and the hiring manager just has to follow suit. So some of those won't even be up to the people who are interviewing you. They just don't want to get into a comp battle.
mm,
That definitely does happen. The other thing is it depends on where you are in your career too. If you are doing something that's super specialized and a company needs your particular talents and you're one of a few who can do that job that well, then you can totally do all of these things. But if you're a junior developer or you're just starting in the industry and there's a lot of people who have the skill set that you do, they're not going to probably stand for it. So like there's some of that has to do with scarcity things, right?
mhm.
That's just it's kind of like a demand surplus or whatever thing that applies to jobs too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely like actually that brings up a question that I have. What would you say are the things that are like yellow to red flags? Like if you see somebody do this in an interview, you're almost immediately like, that's probably someone I'm gonna pass on.
Yeah, great question. We covered a couple of them already. For your resume, if you have a bunch of grammatical and spelling errors and things, I'm going to assume that you didn't care too much about your resume.
Mm-hmm.
That's an attention to detail thing that also isn't super good for your job either. The other thing is we do those like little bias tests of seeing if someone only
Mm-hmm.
talks to Jason and not nobody else in the room. That's a hard pass. Another hard pass is being rude to recruiters is another hard pass thing. Being rude to anyone, probably, like you're not interviewing that long if you can't not be rude for an hour. That's probably not a good sign. um, let's see. There's not a lot of like super hard pass things, but they tend to be a little more human than anything else. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say like, oh my God, you wrote your code with, spaces versus tabs is going to not get you the job. It's going to end up being something like, oh, you were not nice to my staff. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. So the chat built a little pyramid voting up salary negotiation. So salary negotiation, it's a super sensitive topic, and there's like 1,000 nuanced points to this. But do you have some general guidelines on like how to do it without getting yourself into trouble?
I have a really good suggestion for this one because I was always really bad at this. And then I went to this like seminar where we talked about this a few years back and it's really helped. So what I try to do is pretend I'm negotiating for my friend instead of me. What I noticed was when Val Head and I were doing web animation workshops, I was better at doing negotiation because I didn't want to screw her over.
Mm,
And when I did it just for myself, I was having a hard time because I'm like, ooh, am I really worth that and stuff? And like, oh, maybe I'm not that good and things like that. So like pretending that you're advocating for someone else and like based on their experience, what would you suggest that they negotiate for? A lot of companies will use things like PayScale or LinkedIn has one, GitLab has one. There's like a bunch of pay calculators. This is another thing that the hiring manager will not necessarily have control over. Sometimes they do,
mm-hmm.
but a lot of times they don't. Like at Microsoft, I didn't even, when I was hiring at Microsoft, unless it was a whole new band that was just being invented at the spot, which is not typical. It happens, but it's not typical. I didn't even see what the salary negotiation was. I wasn't even involved in that process. I would level them
Mm-hmm.
and they take that band and then they negotiate elsewhere for me and they let me know if it went okay or not. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people are against a rock for those looking at that pay scale piece. And it does change depending on if you're at a FANG company versus a small startup. So like you can expect to be paid a little bit more if you're going to like a Microsoft or Amazon or something like that than if you are at a startup. The other piece of startup though is if you go down in salary, consider equity. Like if you're going into a startup that has a lot of potential, that equity can be worth a lot of money eventually someday. So if they can't match your salary bands for like what you want, that's something to negotiate. Also remember, you can negotiate for things other than money. So if a company has a hard thing on vacation time, you might negotiate for vacation time if they can't meet your salary requirements. If you have a thing about like you want certain kind of equipment to do your job right, that's something that you could potentially negotiate. Something like, what was the other one? One time at Zillow. So at Zillow, they had a hard no remote work thing. I negotiated that I got remote work because I wanted to go to conferences sometimes. So that was a piece of my negotiation at that company. I would say that and this is not a hard and fast rule, so do take this with the largest grain of salt in the world. A lot of companies are going to expect that you might negotiate one round and not more than one round. A lot of companies will also walk away if you start to negotiate beyond that one round. So that's not a hard and fast rule. Do not write that down and say like that is the key to everything. And every company is a little bit different. And again, that scarcity thing, if you do a job that no one else does, you have more leeway than anybody else. But that's kind of where that usually is at.
Yeah. And you can negotiate it. Like there are also all these things that aren't salary that companies provide. Like a good example of this is, a 401k match. If a company's willing to match you 5% on your 401k, that's a 5% salary increase because they're giving you free money. Like, yeah, you don't get it until you're 65, but that's, maybe not the worst thing in the world if you're like me and you like to buy expensive cheeseburgers. But there's gym allowances, there's childcare, there's all these things that companies are sometimes flexible on. And so if they can't give you, because as Sarah said, like pay bands can be rigid. They might say, well, you can pay somebody between this amount and we cannot exceed this amount. Okay, find other ways to get that extra value.
And you can usually there's a lot of companies that will post company handbooks online, so you might be able to do some research about what they do provide and where those things are. And you can ask those questions too. I remember the most important thing about salary negotiation that helped me the most. You can listen to a number that they say and then leave the call. You do not have to answer. You can just say, thank you, okay, let me think about it. And then hang up the phone and go talk to all your friends and like gather a good consensus of that. What is that really in your range? Is it always have them say the first number too, because you don't want to like get into a thing where like a good recruiter will ask you what your general salary expectations are. That's totally okay. But typically what they'll do is they'll call you with a specific thing of giving you the offer. They'll say the offer. You can say then, I'll think about it. Let me get back to you within 24 hours. Usually give them like a time you're going to get back to them by. Hang up the phone and then think about it. Because it's really stressful in that moment to decide your entire future. And it's super hard to negotiate if you haven't thought through what you're going to say and you don't know what they said. And
right.
All of that. So I would highly suggest that. But try to get back to them sooner than 24 hours. Try to get back to them within the next couple of hours because it's stressful for them too.
Yeah, I mean, as a recruiter, you're up against a wall, and typically you're kind of playing the go-between a team that really wants to be done interviewing and a candidate who really wants, a job that means a lot to them, and everybody's impatient. And again, that kind of comes down to that respectfulness, right? Like if you show that empathy and compassion for everybody in the process, and that means a lot. If you're kind of off doing your own thing and we're like, hey, we need an answer, and you're like, yeah, I'll get back to you. It's kind of like, okay, you're showing us something that we didn't want to see.
Also, if you wait too long, they will start prepping another candidate.
Yes.
So don't sit on that forever.
Another thing that I think is useful, typically if you're talking to a recruiter, if they are hiring for a position really early in the conversation, you can ask what the range, like the salary range is for a position. And they know that answer. And they're in like, unless the company is doing something shifty, they're probably down to talk about salary ranges because they don't want to waste your time either. Like if I know for sure I need to make this amount and the company's only willing to pay 50% of that amount, we should stop talking right now. Like, I don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste mine. You should interview somebody who doesn't have like misaligned expectations. And so that, it's, and also if you're someone who typically undervalues yourself and you're going to walk into a job and say like, I don't know, I'd work for like 50 grand, but the salary range is 75 to 100, you might sell yourself significantly short by not knowing what the range is. So it does everybody a favor. It's a very good question to ask. And honestly, it shows me that, some maturity in your career, if that's a question that I see, because it shows that you're thinking about it. You're not just going like, I don't know, I'm going to see if I like the job and then I'll reason myself into taking whatever the salary is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see.
There's a question in here that was like, do the DevRels do interviews at Netlify? I did write an article about our team
Yes.
makeup. So we don't have DevRel necessarily. We have this kind of like hybrid engineering developer advocate role. There's 3 teams in developer experience. One is the developer experience engineers, so that they're the hybrid advocate engineers. One is integrations. So that's kind of like Next.js integration, like making sure that framework works really well on the platform. We're actually hiring right now for a lead for that team. And then there's the documentation team. They just moved under us recently. I wrote this whole article about the whole team and what we do. And so the answer to that question, sorry, it's long-winded, that the answer to that question is yes, the dev experience engineers participate in interviews for those groups within that wider org.
Yeah.
So like Jason, even though he's on the developer experience team, has participated in integration engineering interviews as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think somebody asked earlier if like everybody on the team interviews new candidates, and that used to be true, but the team's big enough now that that's not always true. Like it doesn't make sense for somebody to have 15 interviews to get a job. Like you should have a limit of interviews. And maybe that's a good question. So for somebody who's actually hiring, what is the right number of interviews? Should you have like an interview and a tech interview and then you make an offer, or is it, a bunch?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did the things that are immovable is the hiring manager interview, the recruiter interview, which the recruiter interview is more like a screen. So that usually happens before my hiring manager one. And then there's a technical interview. If you pass all of those, then we put you into team interviews, and we don't do everyone on the team now that the team is too big to do that. Like we used to do that, but now the team is quite large. You'd be in interviews forever. So, so what we do is we pick the people who you're going to be working the closest with, and also secret door to people who are really honest. So like I will sometimes put someone on an interview panel who I know will give me very direct feedback about a candidate, especially if we get into a round where everyone's really good. Then I kind of count on that person to be the person who's like, yeah, but, and that can be kind of a clincher. So that's kind of like, I don't think every team does it that way, but like, hopefully you're in the like 5 or 6 interview realm. If what you're doing is super pivotal, like if you are a lead, hiring for a lead role or a VP role or a CPO role, it gets much more complicated from there. You're going to interview with more people. And if you're at like a VP C-level role thing, you might even have to meet with board members and stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. Ooh, Linda has a great question. How do you go about figuring out what type of companies and roles you want to work for? So this is one that has been really near and dear to my heart because I started out as a freelance web developer. I've worked as an application engineer. I've worked in DevRel. I've worked in writing. I've done management. And all the time I was like, is this the right place is this the role that I want? Is this the thing that's good for me? So how have you, I mean, you've done the same thing. You've worked in like every role in engineering. How do you how did you decide what was the right role for you and kind of identify the things that you should and shouldn't do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say sometimes it came to me and then sometimes I came to them. Like the engineering manager role for Zillow, they approached me for that one. Same with Microsoft. And there have been a couple of things like that. But for Netlify, I asked Netlify if I could work for them. And I filled out,
No.
we have this like your dream job applicant thing. I filled that out. So I think sometimes people are like, do people really look at these? I'm like, yeah, I got my job that way. That one in particular was really interesting because I was thinking like, what is the thing I really want to be doing now and who is doing this the best? And what I came up with was Netlify. Like Netlify is this, and I'm sounding salesy, but this is true. Like I really believe in Netlify's product, which makes it easy to work for them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I really think that it has great developer experience. They walk the walk in that way. They try to make that experience as smooth as possible. And I just thought to myself, like, rather than trying to convince every other company to care about the things that I care about, I would like to work at a company where that's my core function, is working with people who like that's their bread and butter. That's what they really, that's where their values are. Like
Mm-hmm.
that part excited me so much. And then, for that one in particular, the founders were really great. They like allowed me to kind of sculpt the department and things. So that might be a little unique. But I definitely did apply to Netlify because I felt like our values must be aligned. Look at this product. This is the thing that I think is like one of the most interesting things in tech right now. I want to work on that.
Yeah. And if you are in a position where you're just trying to figure out where you should focus your energy, an exercise that I've done that's been really, really helpful for me is to write down all the things that I do. And that's going to be everything from like email to writing code to, getting on phone calls with people. And I put those in a list and then I make a matrix, and that matrix is 4 squares. And from left to right, I go from
Asked you to do is this the values one? No.
this one. It's similar, but so the one that I've done is left to right. It's I hate this to I love this, and bottom to top is I'm bad at this to I'm good at this. And I start plotting out these tasks and I look for what falls mostly in the I'm good at this and I enjoy this square. And if I can find jobs that mostly keep me in that square, I know that that's a role that I'm going to enjoy. And then when I'm looking at how I should grow and advance, I start looking in the I really liked this, but I'm not very good at it. And then I can see like maybe some of my role can be learning to get better at these things that I enjoy. And that helped me plot out a growth path. This is stuff that brings me energy. And when you're looking at like, don't write coding, what kind of coding? Because there are types of writing code that feel really good to me, and there are types of writing code that drain me of energy. And so, was I creating something? Was I like looking at a blank canvas and trying to come up with a new idea? Was I diving into legacy code and trying to untangle this really complicated problem? Like we all get energy from different types of work. And if you can identify which ones leave you feeling like, man, I did so much today, what a great day, and which ones leave you feeling like I cannot believe I lost this much time. If you can start to differentiate, you can really start to plot a path forward.
Yeah, this was actually similar to a thing that I made Jason and everybody on the team do too. That's not exactly the same, but it's similar in like writing down all of the things that you do every day. You write 4 quadrants and you decide what your highest values are, right? Like connecting with the community, let's say, is a value. Making money is a value.
Mm-hmm.
Building one-on-one things with folks is a value. Getting better at programming is a value. So you decide what those are and you plot the things that you're doing into those squares, and the things that are in multiple squares, like the things that are covering all of the bases, are the things that you should be double downing on. And then sometimes you might be like, this doesn't go in any box. It's not making me money. It's not helping the community. I'm not getting better at programming. Why am I doing this? And then you can kind of go from there. I did this exercise a few years back and realized like, wow, doing staff writing for CSS Tricks fits all of my values. And I hadn't really like prioritized that at that point, and thought like, I need to make sure that I always leave space for that activity because it means a lot to me. So it kind of like, just like what Jason's saying, if you think of a framework where you can kind of sort through and like tell yourself those pieces, that can actually help you a lot. I really agree with everything Jason said. I'm pointing the wrong way again.
It's hard, isn't it? Like I do this all the time where I'm like, I want to point it, no, this way. You can't see, like, we're not mirrored to ourselves. Like when you're on Zoom, you're mirrored. So it's just like, you're like, oh, I want to touch my right ear. And then you're like, oh wait, nope, that's not it. But so with that, I think, I mean, I don't think the specifics of the exercise matter. What matters is that you are like thinking critically about where you get value. And making sure that like, if you're doing work on stuff that you're like, ugh, like, don't do that. Like try to find ways to move yourself in another direction. And if you're not doing work and you're learning, kind of the same rules apply. Like what types of learning are you, when you get done learning that thing, are you just like, dang, I feel great that I was able to get that thing working, versus the things that leave you just feeling like, ugh, I hate learning stuff, you know? And hopefully as you get better, more and more things are fun to learn. But like, I definitely found that, you know, in my career, curiosity has been the number one driver of me developing. I make a joke all the time, like play until it pays. And I really do think that finding ways to be playful while you're learning, it helps you identify areas where you clearly have an interest and you're going to go grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that can also go for communication aspects too, right? Like there are probably that like teams where they value similar types of communication that you do, and looking out for those things as well. Anytime you can kind of sort through what your values are, that helps you understand if people are aligned or not aligned with you, and can probably save you some heartbreak, headache things down the road. If the company's values are similar to yours, then you're probably going to have a much better time than if you're at a company where you're like, some demoralization, some burnout doesn't come from, not all, but like some burnout doesn't come from a huge amount of work. It comes from misalignment. So if you're working on something and you're like, I have no idea why I'm doing this, I don't get the value, I don't feel valued, like those kind of things, those pieces can impact you over time. And it's really important to land at a company where you're kind of swimming in the same direction there.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. So, and that I think is like, you don't necessarily need to get a new job too. Like if you're in a big company, if you do these types of exercises and realize you want to be somewhere else, that helps you inform, like talk to your manager about how could you modify your role? How could you maybe transfer to another team? How could you help take on different types of projects that move you in another direction? And a great manager is going to do that. One of the things that, you know, I know this is going to sound like pandering, but Sarah is my manager. And one of the things that I really value about this job is that when I have an idea, I'll go to Sarah and say, I have this idea. I think it works. I'm not sure why. And then she'll just support it. She's like, okay, well, how can we tie this to goals? How can we make sure that you get the opportunity to try this? How do we measure whether or not it was successful? And she creates an environment to try things and learn and grow. And that to me is, you know, that's why I work at Netlify, is because like you can work a lot of places, and as you get further in your career, you'll start to find that there are opportunities all over the place, right? So then you get to be choosy, which is the best, most fortunate feeling in the world when you cross to that level where you get to pick. And so then you just got to start, you pick for your heart, for your long term, for your happiness and health. And, you know, you can find that company. And there are more companies than just Netlify. I think Netlify is very, very good at this, but I know a lot of people who are super happy in their roles because they have leadership structures like these, where they get these opportunities to grow and expand and try new things. And I think that's where we see a lot of innovation and serious growth for both companies and people come from.
Jason's gonna make me cry, and I spent the entire episode saying that I was like gonna beat him at burgers.
Don't worry. Okay, so here's what I will say. If you go ahead and maybe for somebody who's, let me look and see if there's another question here that we can answer. Ooh, this is good. Okay, so there is a kind of a implicit differentiation between introverts and extroverts, in that extroverts can go out and network, they can go out and make friends and make an impact. Can you speak a little bit, because I know that you're actually a little bit of an introvert, which you might not believe, but it's so. I'm going to take my headphones off and I'm going to go get something to troll you with while you talk about introversion versus extroversion. And I will be right back.
No. Okay. So, yeah, as Jason mentioned, you probably wouldn't know this from like speaking and things like that, but I am an introvert. I can do things like this, but they drain all of my energy, right? Like some people get their energy from feeding off of other people, and some people get their energy from being alone. I get my energy from being alone. So like once we do this, I have a few other meetings today, but then I'll probably go in a hole by myself and code so that I can recharge and get some juices back. And like people have even called that out to me at conferences, that like I'm also quite small, like you can't tell because no one else is here, but like Jason is like way taller than me. And so like if at conferences there's like a lot of large people around me, I can start to feel like the walls are closing in on me, like okay, I have to go sit in a bathroom stall for a little while now. So for those interview process, like the way that this relates to those interview processes, it's not that that introverts can't interview, it's that you have to, I would highly suggest scheduling yourself some time before and afterwards to decompress and like gather yourself. I usually need a little bit of time before I'm going to be performative in any way or talking to people in any way to kind of just like preemptively charge up so that I'm okay during the interview. It's probably much easier for someone like Jason, who's obviously very extroverted and like lovely all the time to chat with. So I would say that you can absolutely do a great job as an interview and an introvert in interview processes, but it just might need a little bit more self-care and baking in some time to like prep and focus yourself.
Yeah. And so with that, I'm going to put an end to the questions because we got to do this t-shirt giveaway. And also, I just want to remind Sarah that while she's talking all of that crap about burgers, she is the one who chickened out of the burger battle, which means that I still hold the belt.
I'm not chicken out of the burger battle. I did not make COVID happen. He keeps saying that I chickened out and made a pandemic so that I wouldn't have to do. And that belt is beautiful, and it will be mine.
This belt. I made this belt ostensibly for the winner, but really this is just because I thought it's going to look really good on me. So, you know, it's fine. Whenever you're not scared anymore, you can come bring your burger game and we'll see who gets to keep this belt.
All of your trolling is going to come back to smack you when you lose.
I did also, there is a spatula, but I have to get the spatula remade because I put a year on it because I thought we were doing it in 2020. So the spatula says loser of the burger battle. So I'm going to get a new one.
Using the loser spatula?
No, I haven't been using it. I have to get a new one made because it's got the 2020 on it. Yeah, so with that, I'm gonna do another quick shout out to the sponsors, and then we're gonna pick some t-shirt winners. So remember, this show is live captioned. We've had Jordan with us all day today helping us out. Thank you so much for that. Jordan's here from White Coat Captioning, and our sponsorship, our live captioning is made possible by Netlify, Fauna, Auth0, and Hasura, all of whom kick in, sponsor the show to make it more accessible to more people, which I very much appreciate. And now, the moment that I'm sure you've all been waiting for, we are going to give away some Drasner t-shirts. Now remember, even if you don't win one of these t-shirts, you can still have one. You can go and purchase one of these right here on Custom Ink. Thank you so much to Dizzy for putting this together.
Did this to me like 2 years ago, and it's like the troll that will never die.
Never again will this die. So now I'm going to start picking winners if Streamlabs stops fighting me on it. Come on. Here we go. We're gonna pick some winners. Our first winner is Alexis Nostromo. Congratulations. Let's do. I'm gonna do 5 of these. Let's put five Drasner t-shirts out into the world. Our next winner is Aero Ice 7. We're gonna give one to El Pedro Le Tigre. Ooh, I like that name. One more. Unmarked Evans. Dig it. Okay. Last one. Nate Norberg. All right, y'all. I am super excited to get these out. Please reach out to me either in a whisper on Twitch or in a DM on Twitter so that I can get your information to get these t-shirts sent to you. If you did not win today, remember, go buy this shirt anyways.
No. Disney's up there cracking up right now.
And remember, we have so much good stuff coming up on the show. We have Emma is coming up on Tuesday. I think Emma might be sick, so if Emma's sick, we will do a solo stream. We'll do something fun. We'll probably work on the overlays or something like that. Then we've got Lori Barth, Lori on Tech, who's been in the chat today, is going to come teach us about building Babel plugins. Then we've got Colby coming on to teach us about using WordPress and Next.js. That's going to be super fun. We're going to use Slice Machine with Prismic. We're going to do serverless marketing automation. It is going to be such a good next few weeks on this show. Make sure you go and add the schedule to your Google Calendar so that you can follow along with all the fun and join us live. Make sure you join us live. It's more fun when you can drop boops all over the place and cover us in corgis. Thank you again, everybody, for hanging out with us today. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this today. It was so much fun.
Thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Chat, stay tuned. We're going to go find somebody to raid. We will see you all next time.